The dust of the trail hadn't yet settled on Magnolia Harris's boots when she realized her life in Trinidad, Colorado had come to a sudden, painful halt. The year was 1876, and the letter she clutched in her trembling hands might as well have been a death sentence to all her hopes and dreams. Her fiancé, Thomas Wilcox, had died in a mining accident 3 towns over, leaving her alone with nothing but memories and a small trunk of possessions in a place that had never truly felt like home. Magnolia stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of her rented room above the millinery shop. At 22, she had come west with such hope, leaving behind her family in St. Louis to marry a man who had promised her the world. Now that world had collapsed, and she found herself with a decision that couldn't wait until morning. Miss Harris, Mrs. Caldwell, the milliner, and her landlady knocked softly. "I've brought you some tea. Thank you." Magnolia's voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "You've been too kind." The older woman set down the tray and studied Magnolia with sympathetic eyes. "What will you do now, child?" "I cannot stay in Trinidad. There's nothing for me here anymore." Magnolia smoothed her dark hair away from her face, revealing eyes reddened from crying. "My brother Michael has a homestead in Montana Territory. I wrote to him months ago but never received a reply. The post to those remote areas is unreliable at best," Mrs. Caldwell said. "Perhaps your letters never reached him." "Perhaps." Magnolia sipped the tea, letting its warmth provide the comfort that words could not. "I must try again. I'll write to him tonight and then make arrangements to travel north." That evening, by the light of a single lamp, Magnolia penned a letter to her brother. She poured her heart onto the pages, explaining Thomas's death, her loneliness, and her desperate need for family. She had nowhere else to turn, no one else to reach out to in this vast, unforgiving frontier. Over the next 3 weeks, Magnolia wrote 5 more letters, each more urgent than the last. Each time, she waited anxiously for a response that never came. And each time, the postmaster, Mr. Finnegan, would shake his head sadly when she inquired at the post office. On the morning she received the first returned letter marked "Addressee Unknown," Magnolia felt her last hope crumbling. When the second and third letters returned similarly unopened, she knew she had to make a choice. She could not remain in Trinidad with her meager savings dwindling day by day. "I'll take the next stage to Denver," she told Mrs. Caldwell as she began packing her few belongings. "Perhaps I can find work there as a teacher or a seamstress." "Are you certain, dear? Denver is a rough place for a woman alone." "What choice do I have?" Magnolia tied her bonnet with resolute fingers. "I must make my own way now." 3 days later, as the stagecoach pulled away from Trinidad, Magnolia watched the dusty buildings recede into the distance. She pressed her hand against the small pocket sewn inside her traveling dress, where she carried the returned letters, the last connection to her brother, and the only family she had left in the world. What Magnolia couldn't know was that her journey had set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter her life and the life of a man she had yet to meet. 400 miles to the north, in the rugged Montana Territory, Griffin Blackett leaned against the weathered porch rail of the Broken Spur Ranch, watching the approach of the mail carrier with indifference. At 31, Griffin had long since stopped expecting anything important to arrive with the monthly mail delivery. "Mail's here, boss," called Hector, one of the ranch hands, as he took the small bundle from the rider. Griffin nodded, squinting against the late afternoon sun. The Broken Spur wasn't the largest ranch in the territory, but it was his one in a poker game 5 years earlier from a man too drunk to know when to fold. Griffin had transformed it from a run-down outpost into a modest but profitable cattle operation that employed 8 men year-round and more during the driving season. "Anything important?" Griffin asked, taking the stack of mail from Hector's outstretched hand. "Just the usual. Supplies catalog, newspaper from Helena, and a bundle of letters for Michael Harris." Hector shrugged. "Same as every month. Don't know why they keep sending him when nobody by that name lives here." Griffin frowned, examining the small bundle tied with twine. 6 letters, all addressed to Michael Harris at the Broken Spur Ranch, all marked return to sender and addressee unknown. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. "Harris was the previous owner, wasn't he?" Griffin asked, though he already knew the answer. "The man I won this place from." "That's right." Hector spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "Heard he headed to California after you took this place. Never mentioned no family, though." Griffin untied the twine, turning one of the envelopes over in his calloused hands. The return address read, "Miss Magnolia Harris, 412 Commercial Street, Trinidad, Colorado Territory." "Ryder says they've been trying to deliver these for months," Hector added. "Post office in Helena finally bundled them all together and sent them back here one last time before giving up." Something about the delicate handwriting nagged at Griffin. He wasn't one to pry into others' business, but these letters had been returned unopened, which meant someone named Magnolia Harris was waiting for a reply that would never come. "I'll take care of these," Griffin said, tucking the bundle under his arm. That night, after the ranch had grown quiet and the only sounds were the distant howl of coyotes and the occasional snort from the horses in the corral, Griffin sat at his desk in the ranch house. The bundle of letters lay before him, illuminated by the warm glow of the oil lamp. He shouldn't read them. They weren't meant for him. But if Michael Harris had truly abandoned the ranch and headed west, these letters would never reach their intended recipient. And something about those unopened envelopes, returned time and again, stirred an unfamiliar feeling in Griffin's chest. With a deep breath, he carefully opened the first letter, dated nearly 3 months earlier. "Dear Michael," it began, "I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to share news that I had hoped never to convey. Thomas, my fiancé, has died in a mining accident in Ludlow. I find myself alone in Trinidad with dwindling resources and few prospects. I remember your invitation to visit your homestead when you first acquired it, and I wonder if that offer might still stand. Your loving sister, Magnolia." Griffin set the letter down, a weight settling in his stomach. He had won this ranch from a man who had a sister, who now believed she still had family and a potential sanctuary here in Montana. One by one, he read through the remaining letters, each more desperate than the last. The final letter, dated just 3 weeks ago, broke something loose inside him. "Dearest Michael, this will be my final attempt to reach you. My letters have been returned unopened, and I fear something terrible has befallen you, or perhaps you have moved on from the address I have. I leave for Denver tomorrow to seek employment, having exhausted my options here in Trinidad. If by some miracle this reaches you, you can send word to me through the general delivery at the Denver post office. Your ever hopeful sister, Magnolia." Griffin stared at the letter for a long time, running his thumb across the neat penmanship. He had never met this woman, yet her words painted a clear picture of someone brave, educated, and desperately alone. She had no idea that her brother had gambled away his ranch, perhaps her last hope for security, to a stranger. For the first time in years, Griffin felt the stirring of an emotion that went beyond his daily concerns of cattle, weather, and ranch hands. This woman, this Magnolia Harris, believed she had lost everything. But Griffin knew something she didn't, and suddenly, that knowledge felt like a responsibility he couldn't ignore. Standing abruptly, Griffin crossed to the large trunk at the foot of his bed. Rummaging through it, he found the deed to the broken spur, signed over by Michael Harris in a drunken haze 5 years ago. Attached to it was a folded map with Harris's shaky signature and a note. Map to the silver claim, worth more than the ranch if a man's willing to work it. Griffin had dismissed the map as the desperate fiction of a gambling man. But what if it wasn't? What if Michael Harris had truly found silver and had intended to develop the claim after winning back his ranch? A claim that would rightfully belong, at least in part, to his sister. Griffin returned to his desk and unfolded a map of the territories. Denver was a good 400 miles south. If Magnolia Harris had left Trinidad 3 weeks ago, she would be in Denver by now, perhaps already employed and establishing a new life. A life built on the belief that she had no family, no connections, no inheritance. The decision formed in Griffin's mind before he fully understood what he was considering. He would ride to Denver. He would find Magnolia Harris. He would tell her the truth about her brother and the ranch. And if there was indeed a silver claim, he would make sure she received her fair share. It was madness, of course. Abandoning his ranch at the beginning of summer to chase after a woman he'd never met, based solely on the contents of letters not meant for his eyes. But as Griffin carefully refolded Magnolia's letters and placed them in his saddlebag, he felt more certain of this course than he had of anything in years. "Hector," Griffin called out early the next morning, finding his foreman already at work in the stables. "I need to make a trip to Denver. I'll be gone for at least a month, maybe longer." Hector paused, pitchfork in hand, surprise evident on his weathered face. "Denver? What business you got in Denver, boss?" Griffin hesitated. "It's about the previous owner of the ranch, Michael Harris. Turns out he has family who doesn't know what happened to him or this place. And you're riding all the way to Denver to tell them." Hector's tone made clear how ridiculous he found the notion. "I am." Griffin's voice brooked no argument. "You'll be in charge while I'm gone. The summer drive isn't for another 2 months. I should be back well before then." Hector shook his head. "Never known you to get involved in other people's business, boss. Especially not enough to ride 400 miles. "Neither have I," Griffin admitted, beginning to saddle his most reliable mount, a sturdy chestnut gelding named Copper. "But these letters there from his sister. She doesn't know he gambled away the ranch. She thinks he still lives here, that she might have a place to come to." "And you feel responsible?" Hector asked incredulously. Griffin secured his saddlebags. "I won this ranch fair and square, but I won it from a man who had family who might have had a stake in this place. I need to make that right." Within the hour, Griffin had provisioned himself for the long journey south. He carried the bundle of Magnolia's letters, the deed to the ranch, the map to the supposed silver claim, and enough supplies to last the journey to Denver. The rest he would purchase along the way. As he rode away from the broken spur, Griffin couldn't help wondering at his own actions. He had built a life defined by self-reliance and a careful avoidance of entanglements. Yet here he was, abandoning his responsibilities to chase after a woman whose face he'd never seen, whose voice he'd never heard, all because of a few heartfelt letters that had stirred something long dormant within him. Denver in 1876 was a city in transition, growing from a mining camp into a commercial hub for the expanding Western territories. When Griffin rode into town after nearly 2 weeks of hard travel, he found streets bustling with prospectors, businessmen, newly arrived immigrants, and fortune seekers of every description. The Denver post office stood on a busy corner, its brick facade a stark contrast to the wooden structures surrounding it. Griffin dismounted, tying Copper to a hitching post before entering the building. "I'm looking for a woman who might be receiving mail through general delivery," Griffin explained to the clerk, a thin man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose. "Name's Magnolia Harris. She would have arrived from Trinidad about a month ago." The clerk eyed Griffin suspiciously. "We don't give out information about our patrons, especially not women receiving mail through general delivery." Griffin pulled out one of Magnolia's letters. "I'm not some stranger. I have information about her brother, Michael Harris. These are her letters to him, returned unopened. She needs to know what happened to him and his property." The clerk's expression softened slightly. "Let me check the register." After a moment, he returned with a ledger. "Yes, there's a Magnolia Harris on our list. Picked up mail just yesterday, in fact, but I can't tell you where she's staying." Griffin nodded, disappointed but not surprised. "Could you at least deliver a message to her when she next collects her mail?" "I could do that," the clerk agreed. Griffin borrowed paper and pen, considering carefully what to write. Finally, he composed a brief note. "Miss Harris, my name is Griffin Blackett, owner of the Broken Spur Ranch in Montana Territory. I have received your letters to Michael Harris and have information regarding your brother and his property that may be of importance to you. I will be staying at the Western Hotel for the next week and would welcome the opportunity to speak with you. Respectfully, G. Blackett." He sealed the note and handed it to the clerk along with a silver dollar. "Make sure she gets this. It's important." With nothing to do but wait, Griffin secured a room at the Western Hotel, stabled copper at a nearby livery, and set about learning what he could about Magnolia Harris. Denver was large, but not so large that a newcomer, especially a young, unmarried woman, wouldn't be noticed. For 3 days, Griffin made inquiries at boarding houses, shops, and establishments that might employ a woman of Magnolia's apparent education. He learned nothing until, on the 4th day, he overheard a conversation at the hotel restaurant. "The new seamstress at Madame Renault's has the most exquisite stitching," one well-dressed woman was telling another. "She's only been there a few weeks, but Madame says she's never seen such fine work. Is she that young woman from down south? Harris, I believe her name is." Griffin nearly spilled his coffee. "Yes, that's the one. Quite reserved but very proper. Madame says she was engaged to be married, but the poor man died in some awful accident. It had to be her." Griffin finished his meal quickly and set out to find Madame Renault's dress shop, which turned out to be an elegant establishment on one of Denver's more fashionable streets. Through the large front window, he could see several women working at tables laden with fabric and patterns. And there, bent over an intricate piece of embroidery, was a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a simple but elegant style. Even from a distance, Griffin could see that she possessed a quiet dignity, her movements precise and graceful. Magnolia Harris. It had to be. Griffin hesitated outside the shop, suddenly aware of how improper it would be to approach her at her place of employment, especially with no formal introduction. Instead, he stationed himself across the street, waiting for her workday to end. As the afternoon lengthened into evening, customers came and went from Madame Renault's. Finally, as the gas lamps were being lit along the street, the shop door opened, and the young woman Griffin had observed emerged, now wearing a modest blue dress and carrying a small reticule. She was beautiful not in the showy way of saloon girls or the practiced manner of society ladies, but with a natural grace that caught Griffin off guard. Her face, though showing signs of recent strain, held a quiet strength that resonated with him immediately. Griffin crossed the street, removing his hat as he approached. "Miss Harris, Magnolia Harris," she startled, taking a step back and clutching her reticule more tightly. "Yes. Do I know you, sir?" "No, madam, you don't," Griffin said, keeping a respectful distance. My name is Griffin Blackett. I left a message for you at the post office regarding your brother, Michael. Her eyes, a deep, expressive brown, widened with surprise and then narrowed with suspicion. You know my brother. Is he alive? Griffin shifted uncomfortably. I don't rightly know, Miss Harris. That's part of what I need to discuss with you. But not here on the street. Would you allow me to escort you to a respectable establishment where we might talk? Magnolia studied him, clearly weighing the propriety of such an arrangement against her desire for information about her brother. There's a tea house 2 blocks from here, she said finally. Mrs. Wilson's. It caters to ladies and is quite proper. We could speak there. That would be fine, Griffin agreed, relieved that she hadn't dismissed him outright. They walked in awkward silence, Magnolia keeping a careful distance. Griffin was acutely aware of his trail-worn appearance beside her neat attire. At the tea house, he held the door, and they were seated at a small table near the window, well within view of other patrons. Now, Mr. Blackett, Magnolia said once they had ordered tea, please explain how you came to have knowledge of my brother and why you've sought me out. Griffin reached into his coat and withdrew the bundle of her returned letters. These came to the Broken Spur Ranch addressed to Michael Harris. They were returned to you marked addressee unknown, but the post office made one final attempt to deliver them, bundling them all together. Magnolia's face paled as she recognized her own handwriting. You've read my letters. Sir, those were private correspondence to my brother. I know, and I apologize for the intrusion, Griffin said earnestly. But you need to understand Michael Harris hasn't lived at the Broken Spur for 5 years. I'm the owner now. That's impossible, Magnolia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael wrote to me just last year, describing the improvements he was making to the ranch. He invited me to visit once I was married. Griffin sighed, hating the pain he was about to cause. Miss Harris, I won this ranch from your brother in a poker game 5 years ago. He was in Helena, gambling heavily. He bet the deed to the Broken Spur on a hand he couldn't win. Magnolia's hand trembled as she set down her teacup. No, Michael wouldn't. He knew that ranch was our last connection to family. Our parents left us nothing else. I'm sorry, Griffin said, and he meant it. I have the deed with me. Your brother signed it over legally, witnessed by the saloon owner and a local judge. Magnolia stared at him, her eyes filling with tears she clearly fought to control. And my brother, what became of him? After the game, he mentioned heading to California, said he had a silver claim that was worth more than the ranch. Griffin reached into his pocket and produced the folded map. He left this with the deed. I always assumed it was worthless, the desperate talk of a man who'd gambled away everything. But after reading your letters, I wondered if perhaps it wasn't. Magnolia took the map with shaking hands, unfolding it carefully. This is his handwriting, she confirmed softly. But I don't understand. If you've owned the ranch for 5 years, why would he write to me as if it were still his? Griffin hesitated. Miss Harris, I can't speak to your brother's character or his reasons. But I rode 400 miles to find you because I believed you deserved to know the truth, and because if that silver claim is real, you should have your rightful share of it. Magnolia studied him, confusion evident in her expression. You came all this way to tell me my brother lied to me and gambled away his property, that the letters I wrote in desperation were delivered to a stranger. Why would you do that, Mr. Blackett? Griffin hadn't fully examined his own motivations, but facing her direct question, he found himself answering honestly. Because your letters showed me someone who believed she had family waiting for her, someone who had lost everything and was holding on to one last hope. I couldn't let you keep believing in something that wasn't there, but I also couldn't let you think you were alone in the world if there's a chance. This claim is valuable, Magnolia was silent for a long moment, processing his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Blackett, unexpected and painful though it may be. But I've built a new life here in Denver. I have employment, lodging. I don't need charity or pity." "It's not charity, Miss Harris," Griffin insisted. "If this claim exists and contains silver, it rightfully belongs to your family. I'm simply proposing that we investigate it together. If it proves valuable, you'll have resources of your own. If not," he shrugged, "at least you'll know for certain what became of your brother's legacy." "And what do you gain from this arrangement, Mr. Blackett?" Magnolia asked shrewdly. "You've already abandoned your ranch for weeks to find me. Why involve yourself further in my family's affairs?" Griffin found himself without a ready answer. Why indeed had he undertaken this journey? What was driving him to help this woman he barely knew? "I believe in setting things right," he said finally. "Your brother lost the ranch fairly, but this map, this claim, if it's real, it's something he left behind that might benefit his family. That's you, Miss Harris. I'm offering to help you discover if it's valuable, nothing more." Magnolia studied the map again, tracing the markings with her fingertip. "The claim appears to be in Idaho Territory, near a place called Silver City. That's a considerable journey from here." "It is," Griffin agreed, "and not one a lady should undertake alone. I'm willing to escort you there, help you determine if the claim is legitimate and valuable, and then see you safely back to Denver or wherever you choose to go after that." "You're proposing to travel alone with me, Mr. Blackett. I hardly know you." "Such an arrangement would be scandalous at best. We could hire a companion for propriety," Griffin suggested. "Perhaps an older woman from a reputable agency. The journey would take several weeks, but summer is the best time to travel through that country." Magnolia fell silent, clearly turning over his proposal in her mind. Griffin waited, understanding the magnitude of what he was suggesting. Finally, she spoke. "I need time to consider this, Mr. Blackett. What you're proposing would mean abandoning the security I've only just established here. And while I appreciate your apparent concern for my welfare, I must be cautious." "Of course," Griffin said. "I'll be at the Western Hotel for the remainder of the week. Take whatever time you need to make your decision." As they left the tea house, Magnolia paused on the sidewalk. "Mr. Blackett, regardless of what I decide about this journey, I want to thank you for bringing me this information. Few men would have troubled themselves with a stranger's concerns the way you have." Griffin felt an unexpected warmth at her words. "I did what any decent man would do, Miss Harris." Her slight smile suggested she disagreed with that assessment. "Good evening, Mr. Blackett." Griffin watched her walk away, her straight back and measured steps revealing a strength he found himself admiring more with each moment in her company. As he turned toward his hotel, he wondered what she would decide, and why her decision mattered to him far more than it should. For 3 days, Griffin heard nothing from Magnolia Harris. He spent his time acquiring maps of Idaho Territory, consulting with outfitters about the journey, and sending telegrams to Hector with instructions for the ranch. On the morning of the 4th day, as he was beginning to believe she had decided against his proposal, a messenger boy arrived at the hotel. "Mr. Blackett?" the boy asked, holding out a folded note. "From Miss Harris, sir." Griffin tipped the boy generously and opened the note with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. "Mr. Blackett, I have considered your proposal carefully and have decided to accept. I have secured a leave of absence from Madame Renault for 1 month, citing family business. I have also arranged for a Mrs. Alina Whittaker, a respectable widow, to accompany us as chaperone. If these arrangements are acceptable to you, please call at 317 Maple Street tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to discuss the details of our journey. Respectfully, Magnolia Harris. Griffin read the note twice, a smile spreading across his face. She had agreed and had already made practical arrangements that preserved both propriety and her employment. Her resourcefulness impressed him nearly as much as her courage. The following morning, Griffin presented himself at the address Magnolia had provided, a modest but well-maintained boarding house in a respectable neighborhood. The landlady, a stern-looking woman with graying hair, showed him to a small parlor where Magnolia waited, accompanied by an older woman he presumed to be Mrs. Whitaker. "Mr. Blackett," Magnolia greeted him, rising from her seat. "Allow me to introduce Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker, who has agreed to accompany us on our journey." Mrs. Whitaker, a plump woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, assessed Griffin critically. "Miss Harris tells me you propose to take her to Idaho Territory to investigate a mining claim left by her brother. Is that correct, Mr. Blackett?" "Yes, madam," Griffin confirmed, immediately understanding that this woman would be a formidable chaperone. "I believe the claim may be valuable, and if so, Miss Harris deserves to benefit from it." Mrs. Whitaker nodded. "And what are your expectations regarding compensation for your assistance in this matter?" Griffin blinked, surprised by the directness of the question. "I have no expectations, Mrs. Whitaker. If the claim proves worthless, I will have lost nothing but time. If it proves valuable, I believe Miss Harris should be the sole beneficiary, as it was her brother's property." Mrs. Whitaker exchanged a glance with Magnolia. "That's very generous, Mr. Blackett, almost suspiciously so, Mrs. Whitaker," Magnolia interjected gently. "Mr. Blackett has already demonstrated considerable generosity by bringing this matter to my attention and offering his assistance." Griffin appreciated her defense, but understood Mrs. Whitaker's skepticism. "Madam, I own a successful cattle ranch. I'm not in need of money. My interest in this matter is simply to see justice done." Mrs. Whitaker studied him for a moment longer before nodding. "Very well. I have agreed to accompany you both, provided all travel arrangements are suitable for ladies and that propriety is maintained at all times." "Of course," Griffin agreed. "I've made inquiries about the journey. We can take the train as far as Cheyenne, then travel by stagecoach to Boise. From there, we would need to hire a wagon and team to reach Silver City. The entire journey should take approximately 2 weeks, with another week to investigate the claim and begin the return journey." Magnolia nodded, her expression resolute. "I've explained the situation to Madame Renault. She's agreed to hold my position for 1 month. If we depart tomorrow, that should give us sufficient time to reach the claim, determine its value, and return to Denver." "Tomorrow?" Griffin hadn't expected such a quick departure. "Are you certain you can be ready so soon?" "Mr. Blackett, every day I delay is a day of uncertainty regarding my future," Magnolia said firmly. "If this claim is valuable, it could change my circumstances entirely. If not, I need to know so I can continue building my life here in Denver without false hope." Griffin admired her pragmatism. "Very well. I'll secure our tickets today. The train to Cheyenne departs at noon tomorrow." As Griffin left the boarding house, he found himself more intrigued than ever by Magnolia Harris. She had faced devastating news about her brother with dignity, made a difficult decision with clear-eyed practicality, and arranged matters to protect both her reputation and her livelihood. She was unlike any woman he had ever met, and he was increasingly aware that this journey might prove dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with the physical challenges of the frontier. The train journey to Cheyenne passed uneventfully, with Magnolia and Mrs. Whitaker occupying a private compartment while Griffin traveled in the adjacent gentleman's car. The stagecoach journey that followed proved far more challenging, with rough roads, inclement weather, and cramped accommodations testing everyone's patience and endurance. Throughout it all, Griffin observed Magnolia's quiet strength. She never complained about the discomfort, engaged pleasantly with fellow travelers, and maintained her composure even when a wheel broke on the coach, stranding them for half a day while repairs were made. Mrs. Whitaker, despite her age, proved equally resilient, though considerably more vocal about the journey's hardships. It was during those long hours of travel that Griffin began to learn more about Magnolia, her childhood in St. Louis. Her dreams of becoming a teacher before her parents' deaths left her and Michael to fend for themselves, her brief engagement to Thomas Wilcox, and her determination to create a meaningful life despite her losses. In turn, Griffin found himself sharing parts of his own history that he rarely discussed: his youth in Ohio. His decision to head west after the war between the states left his family farm in ruins. His years working cattle drives before winning the Broken Spur, and his solitary life since then. "You never married Mr. Blackett?" Mrs. Whitaker asked one evening as their stagecoach rolled toward Boise. "No, madam," Griffin replied. "Ranch life doesn't lend itself well to family responsibilities. Most women wouldn't choose such an isolated existence." "Perhaps you've simply never met a woman who appreciates the beauty of such a life," Magnolia suggested, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape. Griffin found himself studying her profile, wondering if she could be such a woman. The thought unsettled him, and he quickly redirected the conversation. Upon reaching Boise, they secured rooms at a reputable hotel and set about hiring a wagon and team for the final leg of their journey to Silver City. The mining town lay some 50 miles to the southwest, in the heart of the Awahi Mountains. "I've made inquiries about your brother," Griffin told Magnolia as they sat in the hotel dining room that evening, Mrs. Whitaker dozing lightly in her chair after the exhausting journey. "No one in Boise seems to recall a Michael Harris, but that's not unusual. Men often change names or move on quickly in mining country." Magnolia nodded, her expression unreadable. "I've prepared myself for the possibility that we may find no trace of him. Given what you've told me about his gambling habits, I suspect he may have moved on from Idaho as quickly as he did from Montana. The mining recorder's office will have records of any claim registered in his name," Griffin assured her. "We should reach Silver City in 2 days. We'll have answers soon." Magnolia met his gaze, her dark eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Mr. Blackett, I've been meaning to ask, why did you raid my letters? You could have simply returned them or destroyed them. What made you open correspondence that wasn't meant for you?" Griffin considered her question carefully. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Something about those unopened, returned letters troubled me. The idea that someone was writing so persistently, receiving no reply. I suppose curiosity got the better of me. Once I read the first letter and understood your situation, I couldn't simply ignore it." "Most men would have," Magnolia observed. "Perhaps," Griffin conceded. "But I've spent too many years on the frontier watching people struggle alone when a helping hand might have made all the difference. Your letters, they showed such courage and determination despite your circumstances. I found myself admiring you before we ever met." A faint blush colored Magnolia's cheeks. "I'm not sure whether to be flattered or mortified that a stranger read my private thoughts." "Both reactions would be entirely justified," Griffin said with a small smile. Their journey resumed the next morning with a wagon Griffin had purchased rather than rented. reasoning that they might need transportation while investigating the claim, and that he could sell the wagon and team before their return journey. The trail to Silver City wound through increasingly rugged terrain, climbing steadily into the Awahi Mountains. By nightfall of the second day, the mining town came into view, a collection of wooden buildings clinging to the steep mountainside, with stamp mills and mine entrances dotting the surrounding slopes. "It's larger than I expected," Magnolia remarked as Griffin helped her and Mrs. Whitaker down from the wagon in front of the town's most respectable-looking hotel. Silver City's one of the more established mining towns in the territory, Griffin explained. "Nearly 2,000 people live here now, with proper businesses and services. It's not the rough camp it might have been when your brother first came through." After securing rooms for the night, Griffin left the ladies to rest while he sought out the mining recorder's office. The office was closed for the evening, but Griffin located the recorder, a man named Peterson, at the town's main saloon. "Harris," Peterson repeated, squinting thoughtfully. "Michael Harris. Yes, I recall the name. Registered a claim about 5 years back up in the Eastern Hills. Paid his fees for the first year, then nothing. Claim would have lapsed by now, reverted to public domain." Griffin felt a sinking feeling. "So there's no active claim in his name." "Didn't say that," Peterson corrected, draining his whiskey. "He registered a second claim about a year later. Different location. Been paid up regular ever since through an agent in Boise. Man named Thornton handles the annual fees." Griffin's interest sharpened. "So the claim is still valid. Has it been worked at all?" Peterson shrugged. "Assessment work gets filed every year, minimum required by law. No production reports, though. Could be sitting on it, could be working it quiet-like. Not uncommon with high-grade silver. Some men don't want competition moving in." "Where exactly is this claim located?" Griffin asked, trying to contain his growing excitement. Peterson eyed him suspiciously. "You family. I'm here with his sister," Griffin explained. "Michael Harris hasn't been in contact with his family for years. We're trying to determine what became of him and his property." Peterson's expression softened. "Recorder's office opens at 8 tomorrow. Come by with the sister and I'll pull the files. Can't release information without family present." Griffin returned to the hotel with this news, finding Magnolia and Mrs. Whitaker in the small dining room. "The claim exists," he told them, keeping his voice low. "And it's still active, fees paid regularly through an agent in Boise." Magnolia's eyes widened. "Then Michael might still be here, or nearby." "That's what we need to find out," Griffin said. "The recorder will show us the location tomorrow. From there, we can visit the claim site and perhaps learn more." That night, Griffin lay awake in his hotel room, his mind racing with possibilities. If Michael Harris had indeed found a valuable silver deposit, why maintain the claim but not contact his sister? Why continue the pretense that he still owned the broken spur? And most troublingly, if he was paying claim fees through an agent, why was he himself nowhere to be found? The next morning, Griffin, Magnolia, and Mrs. Whitaker presented themselves at the mining recorder's office precisely at 8. Peterson, looking considerably more official than he had in the saloon, greeted them cordially. "Miss Harris, I'll need to see some identification proving your relationship to Michael Harris," he explained. Magnolia produced a family Bible from her traveling bag, opening it to the page recording births. "This shows Michael and me as children of Jonathan and Elizabeth Harris, born in St. Louis in 1848 and 1854 respectively." Peterson examined the Bible and nodded. "That'll do. Now let me find those claim records." He disappeared into a back room and returned moments later with several documents. "Here we are." The first claim, as I mentioned, lapsed for non-payment of fees. Located here, he pointed to a spot on a large wall map of the district. But the second claim, registered in September of '72, is still active. It's located about 3 miles northeast of town, up in the War Eagle Mountain area. Magnolia studied the documents, her brow furrowed. It says here that the claim is named Magnolia Mine. He named it after me. Peterson shrugged. Can't speak to his reasons, madam, but it's not uncommon for miners to name claims after family members for luck. Is there any record of production from this mine? Griffin asked. Any indication of its value? No official production reports filed, Peterson replied. But that doesn't mean much. Small operators often sell their ore directly to buyers without formal reporting, especially if the grade is high. And no record of my brother's current whereabouts? Magnolia asked, her voice betraying her concern. Peterson's expression grew uncomfortable. No, madam. Haven't seen Michael Harris personally in several years. As I told Mr. Blackett, the claim fees are paid through an agent in Boise. Thank you for your assistance, Griffin said, sensing Magnolia's growing distress. Could you provide us with directions to the claim site? We'd like to visit it today. Peterson sketched a rough map, marking the trail that would lead them to the Magnolia mine. It's rough country up there, he warned. Not an easy journey, especially for ladies. We've come too far to turn back now, Magnolia said firmly. They departed within the hour, Griffin driving the wagon as far up the mountain road as possible before the terrain became too steep and narrow to continue. From there, they proceeded on foot, with Griffin leading the way, followed by Magnolia and Mrs. Whitaker bringing up the rear, muttering complaints about the wilderness and civilization's lack of proper paths. The climb was challenging, but after an hour they crested a ridge and saw below them a small cabin with a mine entrance nearby, a wooden sign bearing the words Magnolia Mine hanging above the dark opening. There it is, Griffin said, pointing. Your brother's claim. Magnolia stared at the scene, emotions playing across her face. It looks abandoned. As they approached the cabin, it became clear that while not recently occupied, it had been maintained. There was firewood stacked neatly by the door, the windows were intact, and the roof appeared sound. Griffin tried the door and found it unlocked. Inside, the cabin was simple but solid, a single room with a bed, table, chairs, and a small stove. Everything was covered in a layer of dust, but nothing suggested hasty abandonment or foul play. Someone comes here periodically, Griffin observed, noting the supplies stored on shelves: canned goods, coffee, basic provisions. Recently enough to keep the place stocked, but not regularly enough to keep it clean. Magnolia moved to a small desk in the corner, opening drawers and examining their contents. In the bottom drawer, she found a leather-bound journal. This is Michael's handwriting, she said, opening it carefully. It appears to be a mining journal. Griffin and Mrs. Whitaker gathered around as Magnolia began to read. The journal detailed Michael Harris's discovery of a rich silver vein, his careful development of the mine, and his growing paranoia about claim jumpers and thieves. The final entry, dated nearly 8 months earlier, read, shipment to San Francisco netted $4,200. Total now in Wells Fargo account exceeds $30,000. Sufficient to reclaim the broken spur and establish Magnolia comfortably. Will depart for San Francisco tomorrow to finalize arrangements. Thornton will continue maintenance of claim during absence. Magnolia looked up from the journal, her eyes wide. He was planning to buy back the ranch, to provide for me. After all these years, Mrs. Whitaker asked skeptically. Why not simply write to you, tell you of his success? Pride, perhaps, Griffin suggested. He lost the ranch gambling. Maybe he wanted to make amends by reclaiming it before contacting his sister. But that was 8 months ago, Magnolia said, turning the journal to show them the date. If he left for San Francisco then, why has no one heard from him? And why continue paying the claim fees? Griffin had no answer, but a growing unease settled in his stomach. We need to speak with this Thornton, and we should examine the mine itself. The mine entrance was secured with a heavy padlock. Griffin, after inspecting it carefully, returned to the cabin and found a key hanging on a nail behind the door. The lock opened easily, suggesting regular access. "Ladies, perhaps you should wait here while I explore the mine," Griffin suggested. "Absolutely not," Magnolia replied firmly. "This is my brother's property, Mr. Blackett. I intend to see it for myself." Mrs. Whittaker nodded in agreement, though she looked considerably less enthusiastic about entering a mine shaft. Griffin located 3 lanterns in the cabin, lit them, and led the way into the mine. The tunnel was well constructed, with proper timber supports and adequate height for walking upright. After about 50 yards, it opened into a larger chamber where a vein of ore was clearly visible in the rock wall, a dark streak embedded with glinting metallic particles. "Is that silver?" Magnolia asked, holding her lantern closer. Griffin examined the vein carefully. Though not a mining expert, he had seen enough ore in his years in the West to recognize quality. "Yes, and high grade by the look of it. Your brother wasn't exaggerating in his journal. This is a valuable find." They explored further, finding evidence of recent work, fresh tool marks, newly installed support beams, a small cart for hauling ore. Someone had been working this mine, and recently. Back outside, they discussed their discoveries. "If Michael left for San Francisco 8 months ago, who's been working the mine?" Magnolia asked. "This Thornton, presumably," Griffin replied. "The agent who pays the claim fees. But why would he continue working the mine if your brother hasn't returned? And where are the proceeds going?" "We need to return to town and find this man," Magnolia decided. "He's the key to understanding what's happened to Michael." As they made their way back down the mountain, Griffin's mind worked through the possibilities, none of them particularly reassuring. If Michael Harris had indeed accumulated significant wealth from the mine, he might have been a target for robbery or worse on his journey to San Francisco. Alternatively, he might have simply abandoned his plans to reclaim the ranch and contact his sister, choosing instead to enjoy his newfound wealth elsewhere. But neither explanation accounted for the continued operation of the mine in his absence. Back in Silver City, they inquired about Thornton and learned he was expected in town the following day, making his monthly visit from Boise to check on various properties he managed for absentee owners. "We should secure our own accommodations for the night," Griffin suggested as they returned to the hotel. "Somewhere more private than this hotel, where we can speak freely with Thornton when he arrives." The recorder mentioned a boarding house on the edge of town that rents small cabins, Magnolia recalled. "Perhaps that would suit our needs." The boarding house proved ideal: 3 small, connected cabins with a shared porch, located on a quiet street away from the saloons and gambling halls. Griffin arranged for their luggage to be transferred from the hotel, and by nightfall, they were settled in their new accommodations. After Mrs. Whittaker retired to her cabin, Magnolia joined Griffin on the porch, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the mountain evening chill. "What do you think we'll learn tomorrow, Mr. Blackett?" she asked, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. Griffin considered his words carefully. "I wish I could offer reassurance, Miss Harris, but I believe we need to prepare ourselves for difficult news." Your brother's journal suggests he had accumulated substantial wealth and had definite plans. His silence since then is concerning. Magnolia nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains silhouetted against the night sky. I've been preparing myself for such news since you first appeared in Denver. Michael was always impulsive, driven by grand dreams rather than practical considerations. It would be like him to discover silver, envision a triumphant return, and then, her voice faltered, and then encounter some misfortune on the way, Griffin finished gently. Yes. Magnolia turned to face him, her expression resolute despite the pain evident in her eyes. Mr. Blackett, Griffin, whatever we learn tomorrow, I want you to know how grateful I am for your involvement in this matter. You had no obligation to seek me out, to bring me here, to help me uncover the truth about my brother. The use of his given name startled Griffin, but he found he welcomed the intimacy it suggested. Magnolia, he hesitated, uncertain of what he wanted to say, aware only of a growing desire to offer comfort, protection, and something more that he dared not name. We should rest, Magnolia said, seemingly sensing his internal conflict. Tomorrow may prove challenging. Griffin nodded, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. Good night, then. Good night, Griffin. As she disappeared into her cabin, Griffin remained on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast mountain sky. He had come to Idaho seeking answers for a woman he barely knew, driven by a sense of obligation born from reading letters not meant for him. But somewhere along the journey, obligation had transformed into something deeper, a genuine concern for Magnolia's welfare, an admiration for her courage and dignity, and an increasingly undeniable attraction that threatened to complicate an already complex situation. Morning brought clear skies and word that Thornton had arrived in town. Griffin located him at the assay office, a middle-aged man with shrewd eyes and a businesslike manner. Thornton, Griffin approached him as he exited the building. My name is Griffin Blackett. I need to speak with you regarding the Magnolia mine and its owner, Michael Harris. Thornton's expression remained neutral, but Griffin noted a subtle tensing of his shoulders. What's your interest in Harris or his mine, Mr. Blackett? I'm here with Michael Harris's sister, Magnolia. We're trying to determine what became of him. According to his journal, he left for San Francisco 8 months ago but hasn't been heard from since. A flash of genuine surprise crossed Thornton's face. His sister? I wasn't aware Harris had family in the area. She's staying at the Golden Pine boarding house, Griffin explained. Would you be willing to meet with us there? We have questions only you can answer. Thornton hesitated, then nodded. I'll come by at noon, but I'm not sure I can tell you much more than you already know. When Thornton arrived at the boarding house, Magnolia and Mrs. Whitaker were waiting with Griffin on the porch. After introductions, they moved inside Magnolia's cabin, where she had prepared coffee. Mr. Thornton, Magnolia began once they were seated, I understand you've been managing my brother's mining claim in his absence. That's correct, Miss Harris, Thornton confirmed. Your brother hired me as his agent before leaving for San Francisco last fall. I maintain the claim, ensure fees are paid, and oversee the minimal work required by law to keep the claim active. The mine appears to have been worked more extensively than minimal requirements would suggest, Griffin observed. Fresh ore has been extracted recently. Thornton shifted uncomfortably. Your brother instructed me to continue development on a limited basis. The proceeds are deposited in his account at Wells Fargo in San Francisco, as per his instructions. And have you had any communication with my brother since his departure? Magnolia asked directly. Thornton hesitated, his gaze dropping to his coffee cup. No, Miss Harris, I have not. I expected him to return within a month or two. When he didn't, I continued following his last instructions, assuming he'd been delayed. For 8 months. Griffin's tone made clear his skepticism. It's not uncommon in mining country, Mr. Blackett, Thornton defended. Men find success and get distracted by new opportunities, new ventures. I've had clients disappear for years, then return as if they'd never left. Or they meet with misfortune on the road, Mrs. Whittaker suggested grimly. Magnolia set down her cup with a deliberate motion. Mr. Thornton, I need to know what arrangements my brother made with you. Did he leave any documents, any instructions regarding his family or the disposition of his property in case of his prolonged absence? Thornton sighed, reaching into his coat and withdrawing a folded document. He did leave this with me, with instructions to open it if he hadn't returned or sent word within 6 months. I was planning to open it next week at the 6-month mark, but given your presence here. He handed the envelope to Magnolia. The envelope was sealed with wax and addressed simply, to be opened in the event of my death or disappearance for 6 months or longer. Magnolia broke the seal with trembling fingers and unfolded the letter inside. To whom it may concern, she read aloud. If this letter is being read, I, Michael Jonathan Harris, have either died or disappeared for at least 6 months. In either case, I hereby declare that all my property, including but not limited to the Magnolia mine, all equipment therein, and all funds in my account at Wells Fargo Bank in San Francisco, account 7342, shall pass to my sister, Magnolia Elizabeth Harris, currently of Trinidad, Colorado Territory. Should she be deceased or unable to be located, said property shall be sold and the proceeds donated to the Orphans Fund of St. Louis, Missouri. Signed, Michael J. Harris, September 12, 1875. Magnolia lowered the letter, tears filling her eyes. He remembered me. After all this time, after losing the ranch, he still remembered me. Griffin felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that Michael Harris had made provisions for his sister, sorrow for Magnolia's loss, and a growing certainty that Michael Harris would not be returning. Mr. Thornton, Griffin said after giving Magnolia a moment to compose herself, in your professional opinion, what is the value of the Magnolia mine? Thornton considered the question carefully. Based on the quality of ore and the development to date, I'd estimate its value at between $40,000 and $50,000, possibly more with further development. Additionally, there's the Wells Fargo account, which contained approximately $30,000 at last report. Magnolia gasped softly at the figures. Such a sum represented independence, security, a completely different future than the one she had been building as a seamstress in Denver. What happens now? Mrs. Whittaker asked practically. How does Miss Harris claim this inheritance? We'll need to file the letter with the probate court in Boise, Thornton explained. Given the circumstances, they may require a waiting period before declaring Michael legally dead or missing, but this letter should be sufficient to grant Miss Harris temporary authority over the property. And the mine itself? Griffin asked. Who's been working it in Michael's absence? I hired 2 experienced miners to continue development on a limited basis, Thornton replied. They work 3 days a week, extracting enough ore to cover expenses and generate a modest profit. I've been depositing the proceeds in your brother's account, minus my fee of 10%. Griffin nodded, satisfied with the explanation. It seems your brother made prudent arrangements, Miss Harris. Magnolia dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Yes, it appears he did. More prudent than I would have expected, given his history. The conversation continued, with Thornton providing details about the mine's operation, the legal steps necessary to secure Magnolia's inheritance, and his own role moving forward. By the time he departed, a plan had been established. They would travel to Boise the following week to begin legal proceedings with Thornton's assistance. That evening, after Mrs. Whitaker had retired, Griffin and Magnolia again found themselves on the porch, the mountain night settling around them like a blanket. "What will you do now?" Griffin asked quietly. "With the mine, with your future." Magnolia gazed at the stars, her expression thoughtful. "I hardly know. Yesterday, I was a seamstress with modest prospects. Today, I'm apparently a woman of means, owner of a silver mine. It's overwhelming." "You could sell the mine," Griffin suggested. "Take the proceeds and build whatever life you choose. San Francisco, perhaps, or back east." Magnolia turned to him, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "And what of you, Griffin? Once we've completed the legal formalities in Boise, will you return to your ranch in Montana?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken implications. Griffin had fulfilled his obligation more than fulfilled it. He had found Magnolia, helped her discover the truth about her brother, and secured her inheritance. By any reasonable standard, his involvement should end here. Yet the thought of parting from her filled him with a hollowness he hadn't anticipated. "I should," he answered honestly. "The ranch needs attention, especially with the summer cattle drive approaching." "Of course," Magnolia said, her voice carefully neutral. "You've already done far more than could be expected. I'm sure your ranch hands are wondering when their employer will return." Griffin hesitated, then spoke the truth that had been growing in his heart. "Magnolia, when I read your letters, I was moved by your courage, your determination to forge ahead despite loss and uncertainty. Meeting you, traveling with you, seeing firsthand the grace with which you faced difficult truths, it's only deepened my admiration." Magnolia's eyes widened slightly. "Griffin, please," he interrupted gently. "Let me finish. I didn't seek you out with any expectation beyond setting things right. I certainly didn't anticipate developing feelings for you, but I have. And now, facing the prospect of returning to Montana while you remain here, it's more difficult than I imagined it would be." Magnolia's cheeks flushed, but her gaze remained steady. "What are you saying, Griffin?" "I'm saying that I care for you, Magnolia. More than I should, perhaps, given the circumstances of our acquaintance. And while I understand that you now have options and opportunities you didn't have before, I would like to remain in your life, if you'll permit it." Magnolia was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable in the dim light. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "When Thomas died, I believed I would never again feel the kind of connection that makes life meaningful. I focused on survival, on practical matters. But these past weeks, traveling with you, seeing your integrity, your kindness, I've found myself wondering what it might be like to know you better, in a different context than this strange journey we've shared." Hope flickered in Griffin's chest. "Are you saying you might have feelings for me as well?" "I'm saying I'm open to exploring what those feelings might be," Magnolia replied carefully. "But Griffin, my life has just undergone a profound transformation. I need time to understand what that means for my future before making any commitments." Griffin nodded, respecting her caution. "Of course, I wouldn't ask for more than that. Perhaps, once the legal matters are settled in Boise, you might consider visiting the Broken Spur. See Montana Territory for yourself before deciding your next steps." A small smile curved Magnolia's lips. "I think I would like that very much." The journey to Boise proceeded smoothly, with Thornton accompanying them to assist with the legal formalities. The probate judge, after reviewing Michael's letter and hearing testimony from Thornton about the circumstances, agreed to grant Magnolia temporary authority over her brother's property, with full ownership to be transferred after a 6-month waiting period standard procedure, in cases where death could not be definitively proven. With Thornton's help, Magnolia established banking arrangements that would allow her to access a portion of the funds in her brother's account while maintaining the mine's operation. She also drafted a will of her own, ensuring that her newly acquired property would be protected. Throughout these proceedings, Griffin remained by her side, offering support and practical advice without overstepping. Mrs. Whitaker, satisfied that propriety was being maintained and impressed by Griffin's respectful behavior, gradually relaxed her vigilance, even suggesting that she might return to Denver while Magnolia finalized her affairs. "Are you certain, Mrs. Whitaker?" Magnolia asked when the older woman proposed this arrangement. "I wouldn't want to compromise my reputation or yours." "My dear, you're a woman of property now," Mrs. Whitaker replied pragmatically, "and Mr. Blackett has proven himself a gentleman of honor. I believe you're quite capable of managing your affairs, both business and personal, without my constant supervision." And so, with Mrs. Whitaker's departure on the eastbound stage, Griffin and Magnolia found themselves with a decision to make. "The legal matters are settled for now," Griffin observed as they sat in the hotel dining room in Boise. "What would you like to do next? Return to Denver? Visit the mine again?" Magnolia set down her teacup, her expression resolute. "Actually, I've been considering your invitation. I think I would like to see the Broken Spur, to visit the place my brother once called home and the place you've made your own." Griffin couldn't contain his smile. "You're sure? It's a long journey and the ranch is far more isolated than you're accustomed to." "I'm sure," Magnolia confirmed. "These past weeks have shown me that I'm more resilient than I believed. Besides," she added with a small smile, "I've grown accustomed to your company. I'm not quite ready to bid you farewell." They departed for Montana the following day, traveling by stagecoach through the rugged landscapes of Idaho and into the rolling grasslands of Montana Territory. The journey was long and often uncomfortable, but Magnolia faced each challenge with the same quiet determination Griffin had come to admire. As they crested the final ridge overlooking the Broken Spur, Griffin felt a strange mixture of pride and nervousness. The ranch spread before them, the main house, bunkhouse, barn, and corrals nestled in a valley between gentle hills, with pastureland extending as far as the eye could see. "It's beautiful," Magnolia breathed, taking in the scene. "So open, so free." "It's not what most women would consider comfortable," Griffin cautioned. "The winters are harsh, the nearest town is 30 miles away, and the work never ends." Magnolia turned to him, her eyes alight with something that made his heart race. "It sounds like a challenge worth embracing." For the right reasons. Their arrival at the ranch caused quite a stir among the hands, who had clearly not expected their boss to return with a lady companion. Hector, recovered from his initial shock, welcomed them warmly and quickly arranged for the best guest room to be prepared for Magnolia. "Ranch is doing well, boss," he reported as they sat on the porch that evening, Magnolia having retired early after the long journey. "Calving went smooth, grass is good, and we're on track for the best drive we've had in years." "You've done well, Hector," Griffin acknowledged. "I appreciate you stepping up in my absence." Hector studied him shrewdly. "So this lady, Miss Harris, she related to the previous owner," his sister, Griffin confirmed, "and now the owner of a valuable silver mine in Idaho." Hector whistled softly. "Wealthy lady, then." "What's she doing here at the Broken Spur?" Griffin hesitated, uncertain how to explain the complex relationship that had developed between him and Magnolia. She wanted to see the place her brother once owned, and I invited her. Hector's knowing smile suggested he understood far more than Griffin had said. Well, boss, if you're looking to make changes around here, make the place more suitable for a lady's permanent residence, just say the word. The boys and I can fix up the house proper. Griffin felt a warmth spreading through his chest at the implication. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Hector. Miss Harris is just visiting. For now. But as the days passed, Magnolia showed no sign of finding ranch life disagreeable. She rose early each morning, helped the cook prepare breakfast, and quickly learned the rhythms of ranch operations. She rode out with Griffin to check on the herds, showed a natural affinity for horses, and even developed a friendship with Mrs. Tanner, the wife of a neighboring rancher, who was delighted to have another woman within visiting distance. 2 weeks into her stay, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of gold and purple, Magnolia turned to Griffin with a serious expression. "I've made a decision," she announced. "About the mine, about my future." Griffin's heart skipped a beat. "Oh, I've decided to keep the mine but leave its operation in Thornton's capable hands," she explained. "The income will provide security, but I don't wish to live in Silver City or even Denver." "Where do you wish to live?" Griffin asked, hardly daring to hope. Magnolia's smile was radiant. "Here, if you'll have me, not as a guest but as your wife. That is, if you're asking." Griffin felt as though his heart might burst from his chest. "Magnolia Harris, are you proposing to me?" she laughed, the sound like music on the evening air. "I suppose I am. How terribly forward of me. But these past weeks have shown me what I truly want, not wealth or status, or even the independence my brother's legacy provides, but a life with purpose, with connection. A life with you." Griffin took her hands in his, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "I read your letters because something in me recognized something in you, a kindred spirit, a matching soul. Everything since then has only confirmed what I somehow knew from the beginning, that you are the woman I've been waiting for without even knowing I was waiting." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Magnolia Harris, will you marry me? Will you make the Broken Spur your home, make this rancher the happiest man in Montana Territory?" Tears glistened in Magnolia's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Griffin. Yes to all of it." Their wedding took place 6 weeks later, a joyous celebration attended by the entire ranch staff, neighboring families, and even Mrs. Whitaker, who traveled from Denver for the occasion, bringing with her Magnolia's few possessions from her former life. Thornton sent a telegram conveying his congratulations, along with news that the Magnolia mine continued to produce high-grade ore and promising financial reports. But such matters seemed distant and unimportant compared to the life Magnolia and Griffin were building together at the Broken Spur. The main house underwent a transformation under Magnolia's careful guidance, not into a pretentious mansion unsuited to ranch life, but into a comfortable, welcoming home filled with books, music, and warmth. Griffin, watching his wife arrange wildflowers in a vase on their dining table, marveled at how completely she had embraced ranch life and how thoroughly she had changed his. "What are you thinking about, husband?" Magnolia asked, catching his gaze. "I'm thinking about letters," Griffin replied, moving to her side. "About how your words, meant for another man entirely, somehow found their way to me. About how easily I might have ignored them, returned them unopened as so many others did." Magnolia leaned into his embrace. "It wasn't chance, Griffin. It was providence. Those letters were always meant for you to read, even if neither of us knew it at the time." "Perhaps you're right," Griffin agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Either way, I'm grateful every day that I opened that first envelope and read the words that would change my life forever. 5 years later, the Broken Spur had grown into one of the most prosperous ranches in Montana Territory. Griffin and Magnolia had welcomed 2 children, a son, Jonathan, now 3 years old, and a daughter, Elizabeth, just learning to walk. The income from the Magnolia mine had allowed them to expand their operations, improve their breeding stock, and establish a reputation for quality that commanded premium prices. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Griffin presented Magnolia with a special gift, a small silver box crafted from the first ore extracted from the mine after it legally became hers. Inside lay the bundle of letters she had written to her brother, carefully preserved. "These brought us together," Griffin said as she opened the box. "They deserve a place of honor in our home." Magnolia touched the letters gently, remembering the desperation and loneliness that had prompted her to write them. "From such sorrow came such joy," she marveled. "I never found Michael, but I found you, and in doing so, I found home." Griffin gathered his wife and children close, surrounded by the life they had built together, a life that began with returned letters, a curious cowboy, and a journey that had brought them exactly where they were meant to be. "Read to me," Magnolia whispered that night as they lay in their bedroom, the silver box on the nightstand beside them. "Read the letters that brought you to me." And so Griffin did, his voice soft in the darkness, reading words written in despair that had ultimately led to their greatest happiness. As Magnolia drifted to sleep in his arms, he silently thanked whatever fate or providence had guided those unopened letters into his hands, and set him on the path to find her, the woman who had transformed his life, with nothing more than words on paper and the courage to begin again.